Aloha. Another strategic asset that may be difficult for your competitors to copy, along with adding value to your customers, is what we call advantages of scale. Okay, or scale advantages. The idea here is as you grow in size, there are certain benefits to being large. Okay, we have things like economies of scale, which you hopefully have learned about in your other business classes. The basic idea is this: as my units of production increase, all right, as I'm making more cookies, as I'm creating more widgets, as I'm providing more services of some sort, all right, then as long as my fixed costs are not increasing at the same rate as my product is growing, then I get to take my fixed costs and spread out those costs among increasing units of production. Okay, so let's say I have a malasada truck. Okay, I want to make malasadas and provide fatty, sugary, doughy goodness to people as they're going throughout their day. Okay, now what do I need to make malasadas? I'm going to need some baking ingredients, and I'm going to need a deep fat fryer, and maybe I'm going to need a truck, because here in Hawaii it seems like if you're going to sell malasadas, you need a truck to drive around the island and sell them from. Okay, so there's a cost for my deep fat fryer, there's a cost for my truck, and maybe there's some cost in terms of salaried employees that I need to train and keep on. Okay, now if I'm selling, let's just say all of that costs me $100,000. If I make and sell 10 malasadas, then I have to take the costs of all those fixed assets, those fixed costs, and I have to divide them up among the individual malasadas. So if I invest $100,000 and I only make and sell 10 malasadas, that means I have costs of about $10,000 into each malasada. All right. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a $10,000 malasada. All right. If I make and sell 100 malasadas, I can probably do that with the same number of trucks, the same fat fryer, the same employees. Right. I can make 100 malasadas, and now I'm down to $1,000 in fixed costs being spread out over my malasadas. If I make 1,000 malasadas, all right, then I'm going to need, I just remembered a funny YouTube video. Then I'm going to need to spread out the $100,000 over the 1,000 malasadas, which means I'm going to need $100 in cost per malasada. And so as you see, if I make 100,000 malasadas, then I get to distribute those costs across each of the malasadas. Now, the cost of my truck, the fat fryer, and so on are now being spread out, so it's only $1 per malasada that needs to be covered. So my economies of scale mean that the more units of production I have, the more I can spread out these fixed costs. Okay, so what does that mean for my business? Is if I have enough equipment to produce at 100,000 units and I'm selling them, someone else wants to come along and start competing with me. Okay, what does that mean? They have to buy a truck and a fat fryer and so on. They've got the $100,000 investment, and maybe they're only at first making and selling 100 malasadas, right? So they're at this $1,000 malasada cost structure here, but I've got the economies of scale because I'm making so many more that my per unit cost is really, really low. Okay, that's an economy of scale. Now, over time, at some point, I'm going to reach a point where I'm going to need to buy another truck. I'm going to need to buy another fat fryer, and I'm going to need to buy some more employees, right? But that works at what we call a step function. It doesn't grow at the same rate as my variable cost of my units of production. Okay, so hopefully you got all of this in your economics class, but if you don't, there's a brief introduction to economies of scale. Okay, now economies of scale, the idea here is it can stem from your infrastructure requirements don't have to grow dramatically with dramatic increases of production. Okay? So, if I'm a movie rental store, we'll look at this example in more detail in the Netflix chapter, right? If I'm Blockbuster and I need to service more customers, right? That means I need another video franchise. I need another building. I need more physical inventory. I have utility costs. I have employee salary costs, etc. Right? And this number of customers that I can meaningfully service and support with that infrastructure goes up to a certain limit, and then I have to build another building, get another franchise, get another office, create more inventory. Okay. Now, if I'm Netflix and I'm shipping DVDs, I don't have those per building costs. I have these large warehouse that can service a lot more customers at a time. So if I have the demand, then I'm over here and my per unit cost of shipping one DVD is a lot lower than, say, Blockbusters, because my infrastructure is built differently, right? It's the same thing with iTunes versus record stores like Tower Records, right? So I don't have the same type of fixed cost structure. Therefore, I have greater economies of scale. Now, that's the infrastructure side of things. I don't have as many brick and mortar storefronts. Okay, there's scale advantages that come from being big beyond these economies of scale. One of which is I have better bargaining power. Okay, better bargaining power means if I'm big, I can go to my suppliers and say, look, I need to negotiate on price. All right. So, for example, if I go over to the Polynesian Cultural Center and I want to buy a ticket for one of my friends, and they might say, okay, ticket for the Polynesian Cultural Center, $50, somewhere around there. Right? Wow, that's kind of a lot, but it's a great experience. You're supporting students, so let's just do it. Say, well, what if I got 5 people? They said it's still $50. Okay. Now, change gears. Now you're a tour guide operator, and you're bringing up a bus with over 100 people on it. Okay. Now you've got a large enough size and say, look, I know the price is $50, but I got all these people. If I bring all of them at the same time, can we negotiate a lower price? I have better bargaining power now that I am big, right? When you're Walmart and you make up roughly 20% of the annual revenues of one of your suppliers, you can call them up and say, look, we need to negotiate a better price so that we can keep this competitive and valuable for our customers. So those are scale advantages. Okay. It works the other way. If I'm big and I'm the only game in town, then I get to set my own prices with my customers. Right? So my scale advantages give me better bargaining power with my suppliers. They give me better bargaining power with my customers. Okay. Scale advantages can also stem from something called barriers to entry. Okay. The idea here is that it's hard for someone to come into the business if they have all of this infrastructure that they have to buy first. Okay, well, this is another theme we're going to look at later on in the course. In a couple of the cases we'll look at is technology is, as we're going to learn, increasingly more powerful and prices are falling, but it's still pretty expensive to set up. So if I have all of this technology-enabled value chain activities, and I've grown and I have economies of scale, somebody else who wants to come and join in the game and compete against me now has to make all of these investments as well. So these are 3 different examples of scale advantages. Number 1, if I have my infrastructure set up, I can grow my production and therefore my sales without growing my infrastructure at the same rate. Number 2, being big provides scale advantages because it gives me better bargaining power with my suppliers and with my customers. And lastly, being big can create barriers to entry that prevent or slow down new businesses from entering and competing in my industry.